This is Curious Incident, a podcast for special needs families and your window into the world of special education. Special needs parenting can be challenging, and we want to make it easier by providing you with the resources you need to help your child. Let's delve deep into the world of learning differently with your host, special education attorney Adam Dayan.
I am so happy to welcome my law firm's senior paralegal, Leah Rosner, as my next guest on this podcast. Today, Leah and I will be discussing how to work with your paralegal. But first, a little bit about Leah. Leah has been with our firm for 2 years now and has worked closely with over 100 families. She has supported our attorneys to achieve successful outcomes and has developed close relationships with the families she has worked with. Leah is closely involved in all stages in the life of a case, from the initial contact with the family and fact building to hearing preparation and implementation of favorable decisions. Leah has a Bachelor of Science in Industrial and Labor Relations, a multidisciplinary area of study where she focused on the intersection of law and social inequalities. Leah, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. I'm really excited to be here.
Same here. I am too. What was your understanding about the duties of a paralegal in general before you started working at our law office 2 years ago?
Well, upon reflection, I don't think I really knew much. I started developing my impressions of what the work of a paralegal looked like through my early legal experience in high school and in college. And from those impressions, I thought it to be a lot more internally focused and more piecemeal at large, in which you would be helping attorneys achieve their overall goal of a successful case outcome by doing research, saving documents to file, reviewing documents for attorney, reviewing the record, transcripts, things of that nature, but not as involved in an actual case of what I know it to be now.
So as your understanding has evolved, talk about the paralegal-attorney relationship at our firm. What do you want parents to know about the role of a paralegal at our law office specifically?
Yes, so I think the role of a paralegal is very unique to our law office. Thinking big picture, in our offices, when you are a new family, you're going to receive one attorney and one paralegal. And the paralegal and the attorney work very closely together in order to strategize and to develop a case. The role of the paralegal is in conjunction with, but also one step ahead of an attorney. We help support attorneys move cases forward by making them aware about the developments of the case. And attorneys are very busy. They're very involved in high-level strategy decisions. They are booked in hearings, and they are spread on higher-level strategy-based decisions, whereas paralegals are more accessible on the ground. They're the ones that parents can call if they have any questions about the status of the case, about what they can do now. So paralegals are really working closely with the attorneys to flag these issues that parents may be raising on a day-to-day basis.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you help the attorneys anticipate what's coming up in the case?
Yeah, I would love to. So families will frequently contact paralegals just to know what is happening in a case. And they'll also to inform the case handling team about recent communications with the DOE. And these are big aspects of a case that help propel a case forward. And we are very involved with anticipating what happens next. For example, when there is an individualized education plan, what we would expect after is to get a copy of an IEP and a school location letter and prior written notice. As a paralegal, our role is to anticipate that next step and to help the attorney plan for what that communication will look like and help strategize for what the parent will do next after receiving a school location letter and copy of the IEP. The paralegal, in turn, also helps inform the parent about what that looks like and what their actions will be upon receipt of those documents.
These are very important points. We're going to come back to them in a little bit, especially the IEP, which is a foundational document that underlies this process. Talk a little bit about what expectations should clients of a law firm have regarding communicating with their paralegal as opposed to the attorney assigned to their case?
That's a great question. And I think the role of the paralegal at the law offices of Adam Dayan is different than what you may expect in different law firms. And I want our families to be able to understand what makes that unique. So overall, attorneys are going to be engaged in higher level strategy decisions, like I mentioned before. So paralegals at large are much more accessible than the attorney may be. And ultimately, what the families should be aware of is that paralegals will be the most external facing players at the law offices of Adam Dayan. We are the ones who will be communicating directly with families, but also with stakeholders. So that would include school administration, evaluators, and related service providers. The attorneys, don't get me wrong, are highly active and highly communicative with families, but those are for higher level conversations, strategies, issues that may have been arising in a case, and they work hand in hand with the paralegal who may have fielded these questions and identified these issues with the family prior to that more in-depth conversation with the attorney.
I think this is really important for our listeners. So many people who are new to this process or new to dealing with a law firm in general don't know what to expect in terms of communicating with their lawyer, communicating with their paralegal. Talk a little bit about the benefits to clients of having a paralegal to communicate with.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of benefits to the way we have decided to structure our firm with having a case handling paralegal be the outmost facing person and the associate attorney working on higher level matters. Most of all, in my opinion, it's that this is not an easily digestible process. The special education field has a lot of specific ways that you have to navigate it, and it's not outwardly apparent on how to do so. So the benefit of having a paralegal be so forward facing in this is that you have someone on the ground who is familiar with the process. We know what the template of a case looks like and what the typical processes and procedures are. We know the tone of these communications, and we know how to keep a case moving forward. So by having someone accessible like a paralegal, you have someone to understand the special education process. Ultimately, we understand that this is a very important aspect in your day-to-day life. Your child's education is essential, and having an appropriate placement, especially for students who have learning differences, is essential for their early development. So we want to make sure that families feel comfortable in navigating this process, and by having a paralegal be so accessible, that is a huge advantage to our families.
What you said is so true, that it's not an easily digestible process, and the school district doesn't make it any easier for you. If this were an easy process to navigate, parents wouldn't have to contact a law firm. There probably wouldn't be a need for this podcast because it would just be understood. We wouldn't have to demystify aspects of the special education legal process. There wouldn't be a need for any of the resources that we give out to families.
Right.
But it is complicated and nuanced, and there's a need for lawyers and paralegals to shepherd parents through this process so they understand what they have to do. I know we've talked about helping parents understand the roadmap or the journey. Talk a little bit about how paralegals help clients, parents understand where they're going.
Right. So paralegals are aware at all cases of the stage, and we are actively involved in, one, making sure that the case is moving forward, and two, making sure that the parent is informed of how that is happening. So the roadmap of a special education process, it is, of course, very individualized to the specific family, but there are specific principles or staples of a special education case that we are familiar with, and we know how to keep it moving forward. And the example that I gave of the IEP before, starting even earlier, if we are navigating a referral request, the family is starting from the very beginning. We provide the roadmap for how to make the referral request. And once you're first interacting with the Committee on Special Education, the Department of Education Special Education Department, for lack of a better word, we are responsible for making sure they understand how to communicate with the CSE, what language to use, what issues they're identifying for their children, because ultimately our job is to begin developing this case from the ground up. So once we're talking about the roadmap from there, we're interested in helping parents understand how to interact with the Committee on Special Education, coming from developing the IEP to touring a school placement to informing the department about why the placement and the program may fall short.
I think this warrants emphasis. Paralegals being on the front lines in collaboration with the attorneys in our office are able to flag issues needing attention if there's a need for a referral. As you mentioned, if a parent needs an evaluation before they can go further in the process, if they need to be speaking with some other expert to inform what their child needs. This is all part of the journey. There are steps that need to be taken, and paralegals are in a position to consult with the attorneys in the office and then tell parents what they need to be doing, correct?
Certainly. And just to elaborate, just as you were saying, when we receive a client, we want to understand what has happened before so that we can work with the attorney to identify what has to happen next. And we work with the parent to understand what that roadmap of what will happen next looks like. And we'll go as far as from the beginning of the case in order to help them understand what it'll look like once we file the complaint, what it looks like when we're at hearing, and what it looks like to when we're implementing a decision. I'm working with a family now. They have 2 children, and navigating this process for the first time is difficult. So what we've done to support them is provide a template that outlines step by step of what to do next for each child. And in that way, we're providing them the keys of the special education process so they know what to expect. It's one, so that they're informed, but also 2, they're very busy. They don't understand this process. So it helps them access these resources and make sure that the case is moving forward from our perspective.
That's great. I'm happy you shared that. Now, we know what a personal process this is, and some of the clients we've been working with for 10, 11, 12, 13 years know what a personal process this is. But for listeners who haven't started it, or for parents who are new to the process in general, talk a little bit about what makes this a personal process.
Well, from a very large scale, we are working with something that is very intimate to your family's day-to-day life. Your child's education and where they go to school, it forms the learning blocks for the rest of their life. So we understand that if your child isn't in an appropriate placement, that will have an impact on your day-to-day life. If your child isn't receiving appropriate busing even, they're unable to go to school. So these are things that it's not a later gratification, it's immediate. You need to understand what's happening currently. So we know it's a very, very personal process, and we take that very seriously. We care very deeply about the outcomes of your case, and we're very empathetic to how much trust that you give us to navigate this process. So when it comes to starting this process, I think it's important for listeners to know that a special education attorney is really a great place to start. And in my opinion, perhaps I'm biased, the special education attorneys at the law offices of Adam Dayan are really the best to do it, because we are a small boutique law firm who is very attuned and responsive to family needs. We want you to understand the process, and we want to support you all the way through it.
Okay, great. How would you describe a paralegal's responsibilities regarding workflow and helping to manage a client's case?
Yeah, so overall, our responsibility is to make sure that the case is moving forward. There are a lot of different stages, like we are talking about, those milestones that the special education case needs to take in order to continue to develop appropriately. So what we do is we make sure that the families are informed when they're going about this process, and we're making sure that the attorneys are aware of any potential issues that might arise throughout this process. As you mentioned, when we first get a client, if we identify that they haven't been evaluated, ultimately ultimately, in order to identify what an appropriate placement or program is for them, we need a recommendation from a specialist, and we work very closely with them. So if we learn that there is an evaluation, we'll work with the attorney to start developing and strategizing ways for the family to get this. If we're in the initial steps of communications with the CSE and they may have said something that confused the parent, we'll flag that language for the attorney, and we'll make sure that we can either use it in the case moving forward, or that we can address it with the parent and remedy any potential challenge that may have arisen through there. In that way, we help keep the case moving forward and address any bumps in the road before they become a huge roadblock.
Okay, so we've alluded to the stages of the case or the stages of litigation. Talk about the role of a paralegal in terms of each stage of the litigation process.
Yeah, so I love this question because I think it really lends credit to how distinct the work of a paralegal at our law offices are. Because like I said before, my impressions were a lot more piecemeal, and we are truly involved at every case stage that may happen in the life of a client's case. So first, starting from fact development, this is the point at which a family may or may not have an IEP, they may or may not have a placement recommendation, and they may or may not even have a unilateral placement to go to later on. This is the point at which we worked with the attorney to understand what has already happened and identify the next steps that need to happen in order to move a case forward. We also work very closely with the families to guide them through their communications with the CSE, and this helps support the work of helping families navigate this process like we were talking about before. It's not an easy, digestible process, and understanding the keys of this special education system and procedure. It's not simple, and we help them digest that.
And as far as fact development goes, this all revolves around the question of, was a free, appropriate public education provided, right? When we're doing fact development, we want to analyze what has happened and understand, are the school district's recommendations appropriate for the student we are representing, correct?
Yes, exactly. So we are reviewing notes that the family may have taken through their communications with the CSE or their communications with the Department of Education, and we're using it to identify if the department was able to provide a free and appropriate public education. We use that information then